New week, same top 100 list as we are in part 3 here of this top 100 breakdown on the call up. It's on justbaseball.com if you want to follow along. That link is in the podcast description. I'm Aram Layton. He's Jack McMullen. And Jack, I mean, we promised we'd spare the jokes about the players getting better and better as we get to each episode. But I am just really excited to keep going through this list because of course, it gets to ranges where it's just there's some like buckets of players when we get to like the 50 to 55 range where it's like, I love this group. And we're getting closer and closer to some of my favorite groupings in this top 100, but we're getting right to the middle. We're getting right to the meat of it with this one with prospects 70 to 56.
Yeah, it's an interesting crew that we've got here to say the very least. I mean, we've got guys that we've got an 18-year-old in low A, we've got a 19-year-old in low A, but then we have, a couple of 24, 25-year-old big leaguers in here. And you see that there's also a grouping like 61 through 64 that we're going to get to that is incredibly unknown in this. And you've got two guys that were really hyped at a really young age and it hasn't entirely clicked for them. You've got a guy that kind of came out of nowhere. And then you've got the wonderkind, right? The teenage wonderkind right now. Yeah. So, yeah, I'd say the groupings within this list are really interesting.
So this was a range, and I'll always try to be like as transparent as possible. This was a range that stressed me out. So I'm like, I'm excited to talk about it because I love talking about just like the decision-making process. And like, these are the guys that I was probably texting you about, a fair amount. Specifically, one we'll get to Bryce Miller, who's going to be number 70. But also we finished off just for reference with Drew Romo, who was 71. But there was just some players in here that were very stressful for me to try to rank, whether it was because they've let out some steam from what they once were, or they've given a lot of, mixed signals. They have risk, but the upside is there, kind of the whole scene that you just set. And people will kind of understand more as we get into each individual player. But this was a range where, I was looking at, not to spoil, we'll get there, but looking at like a Marco Luciano. And he was one of those main names in this list where I'm like, am I taking this player over or under him? And that's where I kind of used this range to decide kind of what tier prospects would be in. So like the Noelvi Marte, Marco Luciano area here was that range where it was like, is this guy above that volatility or below it? To be below that volatility, either the ceiling had to be a little bit lower, the floor had to be like way lower. There was a lot of other factors in here, but this was a range where it got really hard because to me, once you get to that top 50, there's a tangible adjustment in the type of prospects and what you kind of get from them. And in this range, it's guys that could, start to fall towards the back with depending on how this first half of the season goes or fly into the top 50. This is a very fluid range of the top 100 list.
Yeah, I don't want to use the term like meh, M-E-H, but like this is the last of, because these are top 100 guys, but this is
they're all great.
They're all great. But this is the last of the, like non-bona fide top 50 guys. Like there's a different aura in the top 50 than there is in 100 to 51.
No doubt about it. So let's get into number 70, a guy that, I know we are higher on than anybody else. I know Baseball America recently entered Bryce Miller into the top 100 right-handed pitching prospect with the Seattle Mariners. And this was a guy I was texting in our prospect chat about a little bit. I reached out to a few different people because there's one specific grade that you will see here that stands out above all. And it's the 80 grade fastball from Bryce Miller. And I was on the fence of whether it was a 70 or an 80, but I looked at a lot of the other 70s on this list. A Taj Bradley, which is just off the top of my head, who we'll get to later, as a 70 grade fastball. And ultimately, that is a pitch that is a 70 grade fastball, and Bryce Miller's is better. It's just that simple. So when I was looking at it from that regard, like, yes, it's not 101, 102, but it's 96, 98, touching 99 and 100 with some of the best shape I have seen from a fastball from this just slingshot type of delivery where his release point is so low. He's able to get so low and like kiltered almost where his shoulders are pointing upwards. And it looks like he's releasing the fastball in a way that it's like he's throwing it upwards. So when you have that with 21 inches of induced vertical break, which is elite, that'd be among the best in baseball, and it's at 95 to 97, grabbing 8, 9, sometimes 100, it's hard to argue that there's a better fastball than that. Then you dive into the numbers, the statistics behind it, and it's kind of the same story. I could take the small sample size from this year. I'd rather take, the whole sample size of last year.
Yeah.
This guy threw his fastball 52% of the time, Jack, and opponents hit 160 against it. It's just that simple. 30% in zone whiff on a fastball that you're probably going to get more than half the time, and nobody could hit it. What really did me in, did me in is probably the wrong way to say it because it's a negative connotation, but what really put me over the top with the 80 grade was I queued up every single hitter's count fastball, 2-0, 3-1, 1-0, and he could miss middle, and it would still miss over the batted guys. Like guys would just swing right under it. And that to me showed just as good of a fastball as you're going to find. We'll get to the rest of the arsenal, but I just wanted to set the stage there.
Yeah, it's gravity defying. And you mentioned the angle in which it comes out. It looks like, as you said, it looks like it's shooting upwards. It is a rocket ship type fastball, which is really weird. And it's a very rare form of electric. And I know that Hunter Green had an 80 grade fastball, on some outlets. Did you have an 80 on Green's fastball or did you have a 70?
I had a 70. I am more of a believer in shape than velocity. Obviously, if it's 90 to 92 with elite shape, it's not going to be a 70 or an 80. Right. Like Joe Ryan was like a 60. That's still really good.
Right. We talk about Joe Ryan a lot in that regard because he proves that you can get swings and misses at fastballs that like harder fastballs can't get. So Hunter Green, his fastball gets touched occasionally. I love pointing, while you love pointing to Ryan, I love pointing to Christian Javier, who sits 94 with the fastball, but opponents hit $180 against him because he's an IVB guy. It looks like it floats out of that arm angle and it just continues to take off, much like Bryce Miller. So I'm with you, shape more than velo, and that is why this pitch is so good because, 98, it's not 102, but it's 98 miles an hour, man. And if it profiles like this, it's crazy.
So to that point, who has a better fastball, Christian Javier or Hunter Green?
A Javier.
Right? So that's the thing for me is I feel like it's still a little bit too caught up in velocity. Of course, velocity matters, but if we're splitting hairs when it's 97, and this is 97 with the shape too. Again, if it was 92, 93, different story. It's not the story with Bryce Miller. So one of the best fastballs, I'd say maybe the only fastball that might be better now is the guy we're talking about in Mason Miller, because he's 101, 102 now and starting to flash that 19, 20 inches of induced vertical break, which is a joke. So those are the two best fastballs in the minors. But Bryce Miller, also the slider has come a long way as well. And that pitch now looks above average, which is all he really needs is to have a few above average secondaries, and you can have big time success with an elite fastball. Slider is above average, continues to get better with the command of it. It's good against lefties and righties. His changeup is flashed above average, which I think it'll play up because of how elite the fastball is. So even if the changeup is average, it'll play up to above average. And then he's got this taste-breaking curveball that's a good enough fourth pitch. Last year, opponents didn't hit the slider very well either, but it was obviously touched up a little bit more than other pitches. That's the one thing that's holding Miller back from being a potential frontline guy, really, is the lack of standout secondary pitch. But I think off of this fastball and even just a solid slider and usable third and fourth pitches, it feels like Bryce Miller at the very least could be a number 4 type. The floor actually is he could go into a bullpen and shut guys down with 100 miles an hour and a fastball you can't touch. But I think he's got a good shot with the command being pretty solid of being a number 4, number 3 type.
Yeah, I mean, look at him in the same way that you looked at Matt Brash, right? I think that's the best way to take Bryce Miller because worst case scenario, he turns into an elite setup guy in a year. But he can and is probably a better starting pitching option than Brash ever was because Miller has more command than Matt Brash. It's going to be a race to get to the big club, man, with Marco Gonzalez, being on his last legs, like everybody else being so much better than Marco Gonzalez. Emerson Hancock is repeating double. He's off to a great start in double. It's going to be a race between Bryce Miller and Emerson Hancock to go grab that 5 spot. And I think Miller has the upper hand right now.
I think Hancock is starting to look like he's getting the stuff back too, which is really good news for a Mariner system that's obviously depleted, given what they have traded out in the recent years, and what they're hoping to get from some of these other pitching prospects.
Yeah.
Next up is a guy who's pretty much going to graduate by the time we put this out. He might have graduated already, so we'll be updating this list as it goes. But we figured we got to go through what the top 100 was put out to be. And that's number 69, Spencer Steer of the Cincinnati Reds. And Spencer Steer, maybe, a more limited ceiling than a lot of the other guys in this list, but it's really hard to argue against Spencer Steer and what he's been able to do through the minor leagues, adding power, not really having that come at any expense of a borderline plus hit tool. He's a good athlete. He can play all over the diamond. I think every team wants a Spencer Steer. It's that simple. Everybody wants a Spencer Steer, and the Reds are happy to have one.
Yeah, I mean, Steer he's a Swiss Army knife, man, right? Like, he's just the best example of somebody that can come up as a super utility guy. And yes, he's going to hold down third base for Cincinnati. He doesn't need to be the third baseman of the future for the Cincinnati Reds. Beauty of Steer, probably why he's not higher, but why he's not any lower than this, is because he factors into their future plans. You don't know where yet. You know what I mean? Like, he's not good enough to say he's displacing everybody in that organization at third base. But he is good enough to say, all right, if Noelvi looks like the third baseman of the future and Ellie De La Cruz looks like the shortstop of the future and India's at second base, Steer can play first or left.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And the thing is he's always going to afford himself the opportunity to play somewhere with the way that he's able to continue to just consistently hit. And, when you have that versatility, it really helps, to your point, because he's not going to be as impactful of a hitter to kind of push away those guys and give them everyday reps at third, like you said, because that's a premium offensive position, but he can hold it down there. He can hold it down pretty much anywhere. What I will say is he is adding power. He continues to hit the ball harder and harder and harder. This year, a max exit velocity already of 111 miles an hour. That's more than we saw from him last year. Home run 108 off Mitch Keller, 435 feet. I think that was at the end of spring training or on opening day. Like, we're starting to see a lot more juice from him. And the swing and miss is not really a thing. Like, he's one of the better bat to ball guys that you're going to see on this top 100 list. He's walked as much as he struck out this year. He's just a really, really, really safe profile. And yeah, you might not get many all-star appearances. You might get one or two if you're lucky, but you'll take an above average regular that can play all over. And Steer is exactly that.
He's not going to hit 320, but he can hit 270, I think.
And get on base and sneak out 20 homers in that stadium and just do everything you want out of a good grinding baseball player. And it's a good player. I love Spencer Steer. That was a great get by the Reds in the Tyler Mahle trade.
For sure.
Moving on to 68. Very, very interesting track. And a guy that still has all the upside in the world. Brennan Davis, outfield prospect, Chicago Cubs. I think a lot of people are starting to lose a little patience. He's 23 still, but guy that's kind of a prospect fatigue candidate, given how rapidly he ascended, the breakout that he had 2 years ago, what we were kind of expecting him to do last year, which was potentially play his way into a call-up at 22, 20, that would have been 22 years old with that Cubs system, but back injury, gets surgery, pretty much a lost season for him, goes to the fall league, starts to show some good things, and then gets, kind of shut down after a little bit of a flare up there. Davis took a little bit of time to get the power back, which is expected from a tall, lanky hitter who was dealing with a legitimate back issue and had a procedure done for it. I think we got to be patient with Davis because you have to expect it to take some time for that power to come back and for him to totally feel like himself. It is also worth noting that he's 23 years old still, and a young 23. But it is getting to the point where you have to wonder, like, at what point do we sound the alarms on Brennan Davis? Like, how long into this year does he have to struggle in AAA before you start to get nervous?
Well, he's 4 for 33 in his first 9 games. And I think that you can start to hover your hand over the alarm right now. You're hoping that he came back fully healthy. It looks like he is. He's just not timed up right now. But it's also cold as hell. Like, I get that too. I'd say give me another month. Give me until May 15. And if he's hitting under 200, I'm really concerned.
Yeah.
Fair?
I think that's totally fair. What is interesting is he finished the year pretty well. Again, and started to look a bit better, and then looked really good in the beginning of the fall league, which I know is much lighter competition. But I'm interested to see how he continues. And this is a guy that we were talking about, kind of the candidates who could free fall or ascend into the top 50. Like, here's Exhibit A. This is somebody that if he looks like he did 2 years ago, top 50 prospect. If he looks like he looks right now, it will start to get worried very quickly, and he will kind of sink like a weight.
Well, and this is the first faller that we've really talked about in any of these episodes, right? I mean, nobody else is jumping to mind, because Davis was a top 20 guy consensus last year. And now I think you're higher on him than anybody else in the industry.
I think so. And, that he's somebody that I've loved as a player for a long time. We saw him go deep twice in the futures game. Like, the talent is there. To me, I see a guy that still doesn't feel like himself and still doesn't totally trust his body in the box. And I mean, dude, it's a back. Like, a back is weird. And he was a very explosive, rotational type hitter. I really do hope that it comes together for him. The good news is he's not getting blown up. It's not like he's just not catching up to stuff. Like, he's not striking out an egregious amount. It's really just not consistently making, that hard contact that we've seen him make in the past. A lot more weak contact than we're used to. Hopefully he can iron that out. And I do agree, it might just be a little bit of a timing issue, a little bit of a trust thing. But at 23 years old, he could spend this whole year getting himself right in triple. And, I think that's just fine. We just want to see a positive progression here, one way or another, as he gets more at bats.
Yeah, and it's not the Yelich concern like that. That's immediately, I think, where everybody goes when they see, hey, tall, lanky, explosive athlete deals with lower back issue. You think Yelich, and then you look at Brennan Davis, and he's not experiencing the same problems. Yelich's problem is he's putting every single batted ball on the ground. Brennan Davis is not doing that. He's lifting the ball a lot, 23% ground ball rate in the early goings, 41 plate appearances, but it's just not being hit with authority right now, which is weird.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because the swing is looking pretty good. And I'm even looking at some video right now. I think he's put together some good at-bats. And every time you think he's going to start to kind of break out of it, then he takes a little bit of a step back. But I'm really excited to watch Davis just get consistent at-bats, because it just seemed like this guy just has not been able to get those consistent ABs to get himself right. I know the Cubs are still very high on him, think very highly of him, and he's going to get every opportunity to get right. And I know that's a big focus for him and for them.
Yeah.
Moving on to 67. It's just so funny how this works. So we go from him to a guy who's about 5 years younger, maybe 6 years younger. I think 5 and change, and looking great so far in the early going at the lower levels. Cam Collier, number 67, Cincinnati Reds, first round pick last year. Like, can we just look at this swing? Like, for those that are watching on YouTube, this swing is just so nice. Collier is just ahead of his years. The swing is so advanced. Son of longtime big leaguer Lou Collier. It's just amazing. He took that Bryce Harper JUCO track where he just flies through, graduates high school early, goes to JUCO as a 17-year-old, then goes to the Cape as a 17-year-old, and just holds his own there. Swing decisions are elite, a plus power potential, good defender at third. I think he's got the chance to be that rare plus hit, plus power potential at third base as a left-hander with elite makeup and a good approach. This is a guy that could ascend his way to one of the top prospects in baseball.
He's so high floor for an 18-year-old.
Yeah, as high floor of an 18-year-old as you're going to find.
Which is like, it's backwards, and it feels hypocritical to even say, like, yeah, he's the most high floor teenager you'll ever see away from the complex. But that's what we're looking at here, man. 21 plate appearances with Low A Daytona so far. He's walked 5 times. He's punched out 4 times. He's always going to do that. He did that at every level. You mentioned he goes to the Cape. He's 3.5 years younger than the average hitter out on the Cape at 17 years old. This is a high school senior pretty much that's facing off against the best draft eligible sophomores and juniors in college baseball. And he walks 6 times and he punches out 6 times in 29 plate appearances. No matter what pitching he sees, I think you could put him at Double A, and this guy's going to walk as much as he strikes out.
It's amazing.
if he can, I don't know, if he puts the final stages on puberty, this guy can climb like a rocket ship.
Well, he's apparently already 6'2", 210, and still looks like there's a little bit more room to add muscle. But even if there isn't, like, he's already hitting the ball hard. One thing for Collier to watch and that he needs to continue to work on, but again, he's 18, puts the ball on the ground too much. That was the report I got from the Cape. There's a little bit of time. Sorry?
He's running out of time.
Yeah, he's got to figure this out before his 19th birthday. Yeah. That's the one thing. He's putting the ball on the ground too much. That was a report I got out of the Cape, and that's kind of what I've seen in the early going, kind of heavy front foot, drifts a little bit. So common with young hitters. I'm sure he will iron that out. When everything isn't on time and he is in his back hip, there's plus power. You can see it there. He hit some bombs last year, even at the complex. But I like him at third. His arm is plus there. He continues to move better. I think he has no problem playing solid defense there. Collier is going to be a nice player for a long time. I'm very excited to see how quickly and how aggressive they move him through there. There's no reason to be, but I think he's going to give them reason to be aggressive with him, which is a testament to Cam Collier. Next up is Colt Keith, who I was about to say. Another third baseman. We got back-to-back guys playing the hot corner. Colt Keith of the Detroit Tigers hit a walk-off home run the other day. It was a bomb. And Keith is somebody that's a little bit more limited defensively. But, man, this is another safe offensive profile. His bat-to-ball skills were phenomenal from pretty much the beginning. It was just whether he was going to get into more power and be able to tap into that. Well, he filled out. He added like 30 pounds of muscle. He's 6'3". So now we're seeing that bat to ball, those impressive, contact rates and low strikeout rates that we saw in the lower levels translate into power. And at 21 years old, we're seeing some big power. He hit a bomb in spring training off of, I'm trying to remember who it was off of, but it was an absolute rocket. And then so far this season, he's already hit some balls really hard, looking to get going, but really, really good swing from the left side. Really powerful. And I just feel very good about his approach, his bat to ball, and his power translating into him being a really good bat. The question is the glove. Yeah.
Strictly by looking at the error numbers defensively, I have glove concerns. And I know that errors are the most, simple stat ever when it comes to, defense, but he makes a lot of errors. So I'm curious if he's a first baseman. The good news is he's a big dude. He's 21 years old and he's already in AA. And he has earned his way to AA. Not to mention, Colt Keith may be the best baseball name that we've got in this top 100 list.
It's up there. It's a hell of a baseball name. 112 mile an hour home run off of Domingo Germán in spring training.
And he looks like that guy, right? Yeah. Like at the plate, it looks like even preload. Hey, that's somebody that can hit the ball 115.
He's got the hands high. He has that gathering leg kick, sinks into the backside and just swings off the back leg like a big, powerful guy should. And it looks real good. It looks real good. So he's very young for the AA level, or at least relatively young for the AA level, but the approach is strong. I think the bat's going to continue to get going. This is plus power potential, maybe a little bit more than that with an above average feel to hit. I do wonder if he moves to first base, but because of how good the offensive profile is, I don't really care. And that's why he's at 66. So guy to watch this year. I think he's going to put up some big offensive numbers, as the year goes on, and has shown plenty of good things already.
It's going to be nice when he turns 22 and he's up at the big league level and they move Torkelson to third and Colt Keith plays first.
Oh God, that'll be a rough, that'll be rough corners right there.
Torkelson third base experiment post draft was absolutely insane.
It was worth a shot, I guess.
Sorry for the sidetrack, but
I know. I remember I never labeled him as anything but first baseman in our prospect rankings. I was like, I'm not buying this
because he wasn't.
Yeah, he wasn't. That was a weird. They wanted to try it. A guy who is good with the glove, Joey Ortiz, shortstop prospect, Baltimore Orioles, dealing with a concussion, should be back any day now. AAA Norfolk. This guy went nuclear last season. And what's interesting about Joey Ortiz is He reminds me a little bit of like the Jeremy Pena mold. Really good defender, just a polished college shortstop at a smaller school. Pena went to Maine. Ortiz went to New Mexico State with Nick Gonzalez. Ortiz gets selected. I believe it was in the second, third round as well. And what you end up seeing with Ortiz is, it was fourth round for Ortiz, excuse me. He adds more power and gets a lot stronger. And everyone's like, oh, that's interesting. And the big question was how much power is he going to hit for? He looked at kind of a bat to ball, contact-oriented glove at shortstop. Adds the power. You see a big uptick in average exit velocity, 90th percentile exit velocity at the end of 2021, but he gets hurt, messes his shoulder up. So then he comes back in 2022, and this was our first chance to like really see him in a full season with this added strength. It took him a little bit of time to get it going because it was that lead shoulder. And then he hit his stride. And when Ortiz hit his stride, he was one of the best hitters in minor league baseball, point blank, period. Like, that's simple. You queue up his final 75 games of the year. He slashed 347, 411, 596 with a 10% walk rate and a 13% K rate, 90% zone contact, and 103 mile per hour, 90th percentile exit velocity. That is as good as it gets while picking it at shortstop. If he duplicates that this year, he should be, I know he's older, he's going to be 25. That's why he reminds me a little bit of Pena as a late bloomer, but he should be considered a top 30, 40 prospect in baseball if those data points and those numbers are duplicated this year.
Yes, absolutely. He should be a major leaguer. He should graduate from this list by the All-Star break if those numbers are being duplicated. I mean, almost identical numbers in that 26 game sample he got in triple last year. So he bumps up a level and he levels up 346 with a 967 OPS in 26 games in triple. So he passed that final month at the highest level of minor league baseball with flying colors. First 9 games, he's hitting 325. He's not walking at all. I'm not that concerned about that because it's 9 games and he's walked once. Everything's going to normalize there. But if this is a true 300 hitter with how good he is defensively, you've got a 65 future on the field. I mean, you have to factor him into your future plans if you're the Baltimore Orioles.
Well, I think they have. And from everything that I've gathered, this is not, from any sources or anything like that, but everything I've read, all of the words that Mike Elias puts out there and, kind of just what writers around that cover the team have been saying, it seems like Ortiz is kind of ahead of in the pecking order of like a Westberg. And that makes sense given the defensive value that you get from Ortiz. So it seems like he might be, if he's healthy, which he is, he returned, I think, on Sunday or one of those days recently. And he had a shot yesterday, by the way, into the gap at 105 for a double. So he's already kind of picking up where he left off. But this is somebody that could be a really solid everyday shortstop in the big leagues with the glove, with the high-end bat-to-ball skills, and now improved power. I'm excited to see how he does over the first couple months of the season and then see what that means for the Orioles and their plans with their other guys. Because we've been talking about how loaded their infield is, prospect-wise, even before Ortiz had this, coming out party last year. So now having like leapfrogged maybe Norby and Westberg, like it's going to be very interesting to see what this means for the aforementioned two, given that Ortiz seems like he might be in a more favorable position.
Well, you legitimately have him leapfrogging Westberg and Norby on this top 100 list. The one that I've been discussing on the Just Baseball show is Mateo, because I think Mateo has made some changes that can actually stay. He's hitting 350 in the early going. The thing that I cited on the Just Baseball show is Jorge Mateo has this God-given ability to run really fast. He's putting the ball on the ground more, and he's putting the ball to the pull side more. And as contradictory as that sounds, that's the best thing that he could have done for his offensive profile. So this guy found out the best way to be an offensive piece and be an everyday player for the Orioles. So now what does a new and improved Jorge Mateo do to Joey Ortiz, Jordan Westberg, Connor Norby?
I'm very fascinated. And it's trouble in paradise, but I think the Orioles might have to wheel and deal soon because these are a lot of 40-man backlog prospects too. They're going to have to open up some room on the 40-man sooner or later. with some of the other guys that they have coming up through the system as well, and other moves that they're going to want to make.
Yeah, we need a transfer portal.
Yeah, transfer. That would be a disaster. Disaster. 64, Miguel Bleis, outfield prospect, Boston Red Sox. I'd say that going into this is the guy that once I did the deeper dive, I have not seen him play in person yet. Very few have. This is one of the guys just doing the deeper video, data dive, whatever I could gather, made the biggest jump, made the biggest impression on me based on what I saw. Defensively stood out. I see a potential plus defender in center field. He glides out there, long, quick strides, plus runner, but it's just smooth as hell out there. And then offensively, there's a little bit of a I don't know how to describe it. There's a little bit of a hitch in the swing, or this kind of move right before he goes to launch that seems like it could be an issue for him against harder velocity, especially inwards, where the bat just is very deep. The barrel is very deep in the swing. Almost looks like he'll be a guy that frequents catcher's interferences. That's okay, but there's a line that you want to draw where you don't want it to be too deep. That said, there's above average, or there's plus power potential, maybe even better than that, and above average game power. So this guy has the potential to be a 5-tool center fielder, and that's why he's ranked so high. Probably one of the furthest off in terms of guys in the top 70.
Yeah.
But once I saw what he could do defensively in center field, once I saw that he's already putting up 110s as a kid that's, 19 years old, and what we can already see from him with what we can project as a 6'2", 175, 180 pound guy. I mean, the ceiling is superstar. And I think that's enough to have him in the top 65 here.
Yeah. You are the second highest on Bleis. And I can't speak to Bleis as a player because, frankly, I haven't watched Miguel Bleis much at all because there's not much to watch. Bleis, though, is a consensus top 100 guy. Usually he's in the back, 20-ish. So in the 80 to 100 range. Fangraphs has him at 20.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you can see, hey, the ceiling is totally 20, but, that felt egregious for a 19-year-old?
Yes. That was a bit much. But you know what? If Fangraphs really believes that there's a higher likelihood than we believe that he can become what we just laid out, then by all means, he's got to be a top 20 guy for you. That's like James Wood territory. If they think he's in that bucket, which I don't think is nuts. I get it. It's just for me, if I'm, offered a trade, the 63 guys ahead are just safer and you still have enough upside for me. But I could understand somebody wanting to take a shot on Bleis here over 40 other guys, given what he could potentially be.
Yeah, so BA has him at 88. Pipeline has him at 93. There's another publication that has him in the mid-60s. He is 67 on
Baseball Prospectus. I love those guys. We got to connect. I don't even know exactly who puts those lists together at Prospectus, but I feel like we got to meet up with them. Just to say, hey, what are we looking at? Because I feel like we're looking at a lot of the same things.
And there's going to be no debate either. It's just
we're just going to agree. Oh yeah, I agree with you.
I agree. Next guy, I agree.
That's really funny. I love that though. So we move on to, man, I mean, this is where it gets wild. Number 63, Marco Luciano, shortstop prospect, San Francisco Giants. We've yet to see Marco this year. We didn't see Marco as much as we'd like last year. But Marco has kind of turned heads ever since he hit that 118 mile per hour home run in the backfield game off of Ryan Rollison a few years ago. Yeah. Obviously, he's more than that. He is a potentially elite bat with 35, 40 home run potential if it all clicked, and just a really special talent. But it's been a while now since we've really seen him do what he has kind of put himself on the radar doing, which is just mash consistently. Last year, I think people were a little bit harder on him than he deserved. He did still put up pretty good numbers for a guy that was hurt a lot of the year and kind of banged up. But at the end of the day, like this was a guy that was looked at as maybe one of the top prospects in baseball candidates going into last year, right? In terms of like the question that's always asked, who can ascend to number one prospect in baseball territory by midseason? Like, I think some people would have given Marco Luciano as an answer prior to last year. Now he's at 64. I don't know where the rest of or 63. I don't know where the rest of the industry has him. But for me, man, it was just between the injuries, between the, some of the defensive questions, and then also just, we haven't seen enough to say the bat is safe, like 78% zone contact last year. Yeah, he hits the crap out of the ball. Yeah, he has a decent approach, but there's a lot of variance here.
There's a lot. And he's still like a top 25 guy by most outlets because he was a top 10 guy last year. And I remember you even being lower on him than a top 10 guy last year. Like Luciano, he's Noelvi, like it's the Noelvi Marte conversation. Like you always pegged him as a third baseman. And now, I think that you're looking at him as an injury prone third baseman who, yes, is 21 years old, but we've already gotten good glimpses at him. And he's been much, much younger than everybody else at whichever level he's at. But we have yet to see him in 2023. And availability is huge on these top 100 lists. So I can absolutely see why you were more willing to drop him farther than everybody else because, like he needs to be on the field a bit more to be considered like a surefire top 40, top 30 guy.
So I almost call it like, to your point, I almost call it like double risk because if you're going to be a risky high variance prospect, I can palate that when I can see what you can be. And we've seen what Luciano can be. When you pair a high variance prospect with health issues, now you've got this double risk that if I'm building a team, or if I'm, trading for a prospect, that double risk is going to put me off, and that's why he's in this spot. I think you've got the risk of his profile and then the risk of his health, and both of which have not been trending in the right direction. So, I think it's a little bit of name value that's keeping him in that top 20, top 30. But I think if you ask major league teams, if you survey GMs and you asked them, are there 20 or like list out all of the prospects that you would take ahead of Marco Luciano? I can promise you there'd be more than 20 or 30 that they would list that they would take ahead of Marco Luciano. At least that's what I think, with a pretty high degree of confidence. But that said, it could click for him this year. He could stay healthy and play 100 something games, and you could fly up the ranks. But right now he's not on the field again. And it's really frustrating because we know the kind of power potential he has. We know, what he can do offensively, how special he can be. I mean, this guy last year, even in a year where he was banged up, 113 mile an hour exit velocities. But what's concerning about that is we've seen him do better than that a long time ago. The year before that, he was 115 max. And then the year before that, he was 118 max. So we're kind of seeing this like downward trajectory slightly in exit velocities after being injury, laden. And that's not always the best of signs. So we'll see on Marco Luciano.
Yeah.
Next up, another guy with a fair amount of questions that we got a lot of questions about when we did the live, the top 100 Q&A, which you can go check out on our YouTube, by the way, if you want to see some of the questions that we answered. It's it's Noelvi Marte, who, for those watching on YouTube, can see his silky smooth swing that looks really good when everything's on time. But Marte, third baseman, Cincinnati Reds, off to a bit of a slow start in Double-A, but I'm honestly not that worried about that. That's not really the issue. It's kind of what we saw last year, which was a really shaky approach and a swing that often takes him off the baseball. And I don't know, there was a really good question I got that, is it that he wants to pull everything or is it a swing issue? And it might just be a swing issue in terms of his front side leaves everything. As I mentioned in the write-up, he's very spinny is what I'll call it. So when he goes to launch into a swing, that front side leaves, the bat drags, and as a result, barrels in and out of the zone too quickly, and you either roll over or it results in just a lot more weak contact. Well, guess what? Extremely high pull rates, way too high ground ball rates. Pair that with above average chase rates, meaning a little bit too high. And you got a guy that flashes plus power, but has an average exit velocity that's on par with guys with average power. And that is not good. I don't care about him moving to third. Don't care about that. We were already baking that into the rankings last year. But it's frustrating because this is a guy that could be a 55 hit tool guy. The zone contact's 85, 86%. You saw this one. You've called it beautiful. I think you used the word sexy. Yeah. When everything's on time, and there's every once in a while where he stays closed and he drives the ball the other way, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a top 20 prospect. But then it just reverts right back. So I don't know if it's approach. I feel like it's more swing. And the other problem with that is when you do that, when you have that front side leave, as a result, you are going to really struggle with breaking balls. And guess what? He really struggled with breaking balls. I feel like I'm saying a lot of negative things about him, and he's the 62nd ranked prospect in baseball. So I'll flip to some positives. But before I get to that, like, what's your take on like the Noelvi Marte roller coaster rankings wise? Because another prospect fatigue, guy's 21.
Yeah. Here's an edgy take for you. And like, I typically don't get edgy when it comes to like prospect takes because I don't know. I watch them from a surface lens. You know, I don't dive into the data like you do just because this data isn't necessarily accessible. But my edgy take is from watching him last year at a higher level and like biggest jump in minor league baseball we talk about is from high A to double. But I think the jump from low A to high A is pretty big too because you've got guys in low A that have no idea where the ball's going. And even if it's 89 in high A, a lot of guys know where 89 is going in high A. Noelvi Marte putting up almost identical numbers in high A to what he did in low A the year before almost made me feel better about Noelvi Marte because there's some closure there. It's all right. This guy is going to adjust his game to be an 830 OPS guy at every single stop. Like that's my thought. So until proven otherwise, I view Noelvi Marte as a 275 hitter with an 830 OPS.
And that's the crazy thing, man, is like he is still competing and not only competing, hitting to an above average clip despite the approach issues or despite the swing issues, whatever you want to call it.
And that's
the craziest part.
But because we viewed him so highly going into last year, we paid so much attention to his flaws instead of what he was doing well in 21 that he did well again in 22. You know what I mean? So we're almost like focused on the negative there.
Yeah. You know, and that's the thing is like, I've talked to some people that, you know, don't see Noelvi as a top 100 guy. I've talked to some people that say that, and both I very much respect, that say, hey, we're being way too hard on this guy. So, you know, that always tells me this is a very polarizing prospect that, you know, there's no wrong answer. We end up siding kind of somewhere in the middle. But for me, it's like, okay, why is he ahead of Spencer Steer was the question that Peter gave me on the top 100 breakdown we did on the Just Baseball show. Great question. And ultimately, it's because of what you said, right? We've already seen him put up competitive numbers despite the approach and sometimes swing issues and, you know, power inefficiencies at times because there's just sometimes he just hits the ball so weakly for a guy that's so powerful because of how much he takes himself out of it.
Yeah.
Yet he's 21 years old and he's got 2-3 years to really iron this out still. And I feel like he can do that. If this guy starts using the whole field, controlling his body, staying on the baseball, I think the overall approach will get better. The swing decisions will get better. Will get better against breaking balls. And again, he's 85% zone contact. That's great. So I do believe that this guy can rise back up. And honestly, it's going to be really interesting to see which one of him or Luciano kind of takes that next step. Both very risky, both stacked for a reason. They're kind of in the same department there. But Marte's bat to ball ability is what put him just ahead for me, even though Luciano has some more power.
And if I had to pick one, I think I'm going with Noelvi because he's available. He played 115 games last year after playing 107 the year before. He's on the field.
100%.
I also think he could be a decent third baseman. Sorry, one more thing. I think he could be a pretty solid defensive third baseman.
I think he gets a little bit more flack than he deserves there. I think they tried him at third for too long. They should have realized that probably wasn't going to happen. I know you don't want to move a guy at 20, but you could kind of tell. Like when every write-up says probably moving, you should probably just move him. So, you know, I think it's been a later time to kind of learn third base now. And I think he'll get comfortable. And I agree. I think he can be a fine defender there. That's why I have 40-50 future. And I think if he's a 50 defender there, like that's just fine with what you're going to get offensively. And his power will play up in Great American Ballpark. So if it clicks, it's going to click. I don't think there's going to be any in between with Marte in that regard. Next up is a guy who's set to graduate very soon, a guy that I know you've watched plenty of, and it's been really fun to watch his development. Oscar Colas, outfield prospect, Chicago White Sox. Colas, this dude's power, I think, is even bigger than maybe some people gave him credit for. Everyone knew that Colas had juice, but I don't know if anyone talked about the kind of juice that we have seen from Colas, really in the early going at the big league career points, in spring training, and then even at the end of last year. Colas put up a lot more 110s, 111s, 112s, even 113, 114s than I thought we were going to see from him. On top of that, he crushes fastballs. And if you crush fastballs, you can crush fastballs, crush velocity. You can do that to at least being a platoon guy at the big league level. So that's why I kind of like, even though he's not a high floor prospect, I think the way he's able to hit fastballs and hit velocity almost gives him a high floor. Last year against four-seamers, he hit almost 400 with a 1,000 OPS. And then if you cue that up, similar to like we did with Edouard Julien, if you cue it up to velocity, 95 plus, a 1,050 OPS, like the dude just crushes heaters, crushes lefties, needs to improve against breaking balls and changeups. But again, if you crush lefties and crush all fastballs, you're going to find a spot in the big leagues.
Yeah, and you're going to find a spot in that lineup too. And so many of those guys in that lineup are beaten by off speed. So when you get down to 7 or 8 in the batting order, like obviously these guys do their homework on Colas. They know that he's a fastball masher, but you can't throw exclusively breaking pitches to 1 through 9 in that batting order. And you would prefer to get Eloy Jimenez and Tim Anderson and Luis Robert and Yohan Moncada out by peppering them with breaking balls. You got to throw a fastball at some point. And especially if the breaking pitch isn't working, you got to go to the fastball. Colas being in a good lineup when fully healthy, and that's a just baseball show conversation, like, oh my gosh. But Colas being in that fully healthy lineup, he's the 7 hitter. 7 hitters see fastballs. And if he sees fastballs, he's going to hit them a long way.
And he's done that already in the early going of his big league career. He's got to improve the approach. Yeah. Super high chase rate. That's always kind of been the case for him. But he and everybody else in that lineup. Yeah, literally. That's got to be the highest swing rate of any team in baseball. But he's already crushing fastballs. I think he's hitting over 400 against them in a small sample size this year. There's going to be strikeouts, man. Like, it's going to happen. But at 24 years old, flew through the minor leagues, kind of skipped AAA. He was barely there. I do wonder how much he's going to hit. But I do think that there's potential for at least a fringe average hit tool. If he does that with the power, he's a fine glove out there. He could get better with his reads and routes. His arm, he's got a hose as a former pitcher too. He's just a fun prospect that just hits the ball too hard and hits fastballs too hard to not be in the top 100. But he was a tough guy to rank because of the proximity, but still risk at the same time. But I'd venture to say that there's not a lot of guys. There's not 65 guys that teams are taking over Oscar Colas right now. And he broke into a lineup for a pretty good White Sox offense.
Yeah, I mean, it was either going to be him or, Gavin Sheets out in right full time. And I think the White Sox, yes, while Sheets is not the best option, Colas was a guy that won a job in spring training. Like Colas and Jordan Walker, I think, and Volpe. Those are the 3 best examples of guys that won jobs.
Straight up won them. I agree. And Colas looked a little bit more patient in the spring stretch. I'd like to see that come back a little bit.
I think he knows what he needed to do, and now he's like, all right, I'm going to be me now.
Right back on my BS again. I'm just going to start cutting loose. Next up, number 60, Robert Hassell III. Hassell, I would categorize last year as a lost season for Robert Hassell. And it's funny because we were going back and forth about this with your co-host of the Show and Go podcast with you, Taylor Davis, longtime professional catcher, former big league catcher. When we were doing our live, he was saying, hamate, no big deal. I don't want to argue with a guy that played Major League Baseball because obviously he knows more than I do. But I can only speak to what I've been told by guys that have dealt with the hamate. It's taken them a long time to kind of feel like themselves again. And I think that could have easily impacted Robert Hassell, a guy with fringy power to begin with last year. Not only that, he gets traded in, one of the biggest hauls that we've seen in, modern baseball, really. And
he's
that
like
Juan Soto
piece
deal.
4 in that deal,
which is
insane.
Stupid. But he's just came back. He's doing, I think, a rehab assignment right now in like low A before they bring him up back to high A or eventually maybe double, where he finished the season last year. Hassell's a weird one because we're waiting for him to grow into a little bit more power, but at the same time, while we've been waiting for that, like the hit tool kind of diminished at the end of last year. You saw plenty of Hassell in Fort Wayne when you were the play-by-play guy out there in 2019, and you spoke to the speed being better than he got credit for, and you were right, and I think that's something that people have come back around on, that realizing, hey, this guy's going to stick in center. And I think realizing that he's going to stick in center takes some pressure off of whatever power we were begging him to grow into. And I don't think he needs to grow into more power to be a successful guy. I think if he's a doubles hitter that sneaks out 15 homers, he's a good base stealer, he can stick in center, and if he has a late blooming power stroke like Christian Yelich a few years into his big league career, that's fine. I think he can get to the big leagues off of gap to gap, good bat to ball, and good speed and defense in center. The question is, was last year a result of a messed up hamate bone, which a lot of very, very prevalent evaluators and analysts in the industry have said and seem to believe, and the Nationals seem to believe as well? Or did he get kind of punched in the face by Double-A last year? Because before that, he was really good with the Padres in those 75 games, and he plays 10 games in high A with the Nationals and wasn't good, and then played 27 games in Double-A with the Nationals and wasn't good. So it was a little bit of a weird sample and stretch there. But you have a 75 game sample with the Padres, Jack, where he hit 299, 379, 467 with 10 homers and 20 bags. Like, where'd that go?
Yeah, I think that went when his hamate did. And I think that the best thing he could have done for himself was getting that fixed this offseason. So I am one of those that's willing to chalk it up to maybe him being hampered after the trade. And I hope that's the case, because I love watching this guy's body move, whether it's defensively in the outfield or at the plate, even the movements and the weight transfer. Like, he's so athletic and so in tune with every single minute movement that his body makes during a swing. And like, just watching him maneuver a baseball field is really fun, because with Wood, you dream on the Judge statue, right? The gargantuan figure that hits the ball a million feet and can run and can throw and can move. With Hassell, it's like, this dude's silky as hell, like an outfield version of Trey Turner. I think Hassell is a very silky baseball player, and I think that he loves that. After our conversation with him on this podcast, last year when he was still in Fort Wayne, I think that he wants to lean into that smooth athleticism, and I think that comes back this year.
And an interesting point that you bring up on the hamate too, because it didn't break until the fall league. So it could have been something, and it's a little bit different than like, it's broken, we remove it, and now you're back in 6 weeks and like just trying to get it back. Because guys sometimes take a while to get going after the procedure. For him, it didn't break till the fall league, but he tapered off dramatically at the end of the year. And so I can speak to this anecdotally with Griffin Conine, one of my closest friends, who broke his hamate bone ahead of last year. And he said that he broke it in the offseason, but he said it was bothering him the whole end of the year. And he like kind of knew that it was probably going to go. And then it was starting to affect his swing. And then finally in the offseason, he was taking BP and pop, there it went. So that's a thing that I'm sure it was not only Griffin's anatomy. It could have happened to other guys. So if that was bothering him for a while, a guy that's already fringy with the power, that could have been the difference. To your point, leaning into that mold that we see for him now, what do you think that is? Like, everyday center fielder that can hit for average and sneak out enough home runs? Like, I think I kind of see a Bryce Turang type of offense in center field. Like, I do see a Bryce Turang type of player, left-handed stroke, sneaky power, but at the end of the day, it's 10 to 15 homers, good defense at the position, and a great base stealer. Do you kind of see that?
Yes. I don't know if there's a guy that fits what I think Hassell can do. Like, Nimmo is a name that jumps to mind with way less walks. But Nimmo is, hey, I can hit 300. He hit 275 last year, played great defense in center, swiped enough bags. That's the thing that Hassell doesn't get enough credit for. Not only can he steal bags, he's an incredibly efficient base
He's
stealer.
good, man. He's really good.
24 for 27 last year.
And I think with these rules, like, I think he's going to keep being a machine. He is quick, savvy, and I think that's going to be a big part of his game. I really do see the Terang crossover here the more I think about it.
Yeah.
And remember, Terang didn't really grow into the average power until recently. I think Hassell could maybe tap into more than that. But that's a good profile as a center fielder, man. Like, that's a really good profile.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't think that there's a guy that looks like him right now.
Not right now in center field, no. And also, we don't totally know what he looks like. He could grow into more power. He's still so young, and so athletic, and a great dude. We had him on the show a little while back. Love his makeup. Love the way he approaches the game, and I think that's going to go a long way for him too after bouncing back off of a rough year. I think he's a big part of the future in Washington, and a guy that I'm prepared to kind of bump right back up the ranks very soon. 59, Termarr Johnson, second base prospect, Pittsburgh Pirates, who, if I'm not mistaken, is yet to make his debut, right? He's still dealing with a hammy. Has he played yet this year?
No, he's not.
No, I didn't think so. I thought I would. I definitely would have saw that. I mean, dude, it's hard to talk too much about Termarr. I tend to rank him a little bit lower. One, because I don't like ranking recently drafted guys super high because they were drafted super high. I don't really believe in that. Like, you got to look at them holistically and make your own decisions. That said, Termarr is a special offensive talent, but we haven't seen that much from him offensively yet, professionally. And he's limited defensively, right? He's going to play second base. And that's probably where he's going to play. So there's a lot of pressure on the bat. There's not that much speed. We'll see how much power there is. I think there could be above average to plus power. But this is a very unknown player that I think it's nuts to rank him in the top 30. We have him at 59 because I see the upside. It's elite bat speed. It's special offensive talent. But he's a second baseman that we haven't seen yet. You can't tell me that teams are taking Termarr over some of the other names that we're going to talk about ahead of him.
Yeah, I don't know how to view this guy. Because, again, there isn't anybody that's like him. Like, Altuve was a good second baseman. You know what I mean?
He also flies.
Yeah, Altuve flies. Like, Termarr doesn't. So I'm thinking, all right, you see the numbers that Connor Norby put up in the minor leagues last year? Like, that's what you're hoping Termarr can put up in the major leagues.
Yes.
And Termarr has a higher ceiling than Connor Norby. But if Tamar's minor league season on a yearly basis looks like Connor Norby's 2022, the Pittsburgh Pirates are very happy. So I guess I view those two in a similar light, although I'm not sure. Like, what do you hope for? Albies? I don't know.
I was like Marcus Semien? Like, is that
yes.
But that's like an impactful defender. He's a shortstop to come up. I think you're looking at a third, like what you're hoping for is a third base profile at second.
Yeah.
Which is cool. That's fantastic, right? Like, I think there's a world where some of the Pirates brass would give you a ridiculous comp. Like, they'd be saying, we're hoping that he's Rafael Devers offensively.
Jeez. Yeah.
But that's what I imagine. Like, you saw the kind of comps and like stuff that I think that's egregious. I think it's ridiculous.
We believe we got the best prep hitter since Bryce Harper were some of the comps that we were getting.
Didn't they say, they said that stuff, right?
Yes.
Like, that's what I'm saying. So, like, that's essentially saying that you're hoping it can be Rafael Devers. I can see why they think that and believe that, and that could possibly be the case. But without enough complementary tools, I need to see more of the bat before I feel that good. I can't just say, oh, that's sick bat speed. That'll play. There's too many variables. That said, the bat speed is sick enough, and he does look special enough that he is a top 60 prospect. No doubt about it. But I want to see more. If we see him get off to a good start and we start to see like what that bat can do, then all of a sudden, okay, I'm starting to to lock in a little bit more, and he could fly up the ranks. Someone else I'm kind of thinking about what the ceiling could be is maybe like a Jose Miranda offensively. Something like that.
Yeah, but
that's a guy that hit for average, didn't strike out, and launched a lot of home runs in 2021.
But they want more.
They want more than 30 home runs in double and triple with a 344 batting average.
No, they want that.
Yeah, right. That. Yeah, but I know what you're saying. Like in terms of the big leagues, you want more, and I think like Termarr's game will translate more directly to the big leagues. I think Miranda was just kind of feasting on lesser competition, but he's a really hard guy to project. I'm not going to say best prep bat since Bryce Harper though. I just can't say that yet. Maybe he is though. I don't know. 58, the legend himself, who's been on the show multiple times, Joey Wiemer. Joey Wiemer is just off to a phenomenal start to his professional career, or to his big league career. Was off to a phenomenal start to his professional career. And Wiemer is just awesome, man. We've talked about it. We've talked about why I think we've always been the high guys on Joey Wiemer. And I know he's slowed down a little bit over his last few games, but what he showed us out of the gate, I think is what we can kind of potentially expect from him. His defense has been spectacular. Got to give him credit there. He's stolen a couple bags. He's going to be a streaky hitter. That's just what it's going to be. But we're talking about plus power potential, plus speed, potentially a plus defender. Even if the hit tool is below average, he's going to be a very impactful baseball player.
Yeah. I mean, do you want me to give you another Hunter Pence comp? I feel like everybody's done the Hunter Pence thing already.
Yeah, I know. I am hoping that he gets consistent at bats. When guys come back and maybe other prospects are coming through, what they do. But Wiemer to me is somebody that it's going to be streaky. He might not hit for average, but 70 speed or at least 60 speed and 70 power. I should probably bump that to 60. I think he's a true 60 runner. 70 power, that's pretty damn good.
Yeah, can I tell you? So Sal Frelick is off to a really slow start in triple. I think that gives Garrett Mitchell and Wiemer a bit more time in the outfield. I think we're going to see in a couple weeks, maybe. Check back with me in a month. I think that we're going to see a 3-game stretch where Wiemer homers 3 games in a row. That's the kind of guy he is.
I do think he's totally that guy. And it's been, again, he started his professional career by hitting in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games straight. And then, in true rookie fashion, the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games straight, he did not pick up a hit. Yeah. Happens. I think if they give him consistent at-bats, he'll continue to get better. But again, what really stands out to me is what he's been doing defensively. Eye test-wise, been making all the plays, looks great.
Flying colors.
Outs above average-wise, flying colors. Already 3 outs above average, 6 defensive runs saved in the outfield.
Damn.
That gives him a .3 F/WAR in 15 games, despite not hitting that great over his last handful of games. Most importantly, not punching out that much and walking. He will impact the game even if he's not hitting, but he will hit, and he will punish mistakes at the very least with great complementary tools.
His game is so funny at times because there was a stretch in Biloxi where he was striking out every time he came to the plate.
It's just timing me because all of the moves that he has, but when he's off, dude, but
the thing is, now he's up there, and you see that in Biloxi, and it's what's going to happen when he gets to Milwaukee? Not that. How
about when he got to Nashville? He struck out 15% of the time in Nashville. I think he was bored in Biloxi. I'm not even kidding. He had been dominating there for so long. We're waiting for him to get called up or promoted, and it just didn't happen. And then they promote him in the middle of a slump, and then he hits 330 with a 15% K rate. That guy's one of my favorite personalities in the minors, and I could almost imagine him just being bored and being all right, if you're not going to promote me, I'm just gonna kind of coast for a little bit. Because the second he got promoted, it was a joke, and that's in a way harder place to hit too.
Yeah.
In Nashville versus Biloxi.
Yeah.
Next up, a guy that I think has been on the shelf to start the season, but should be back very soon. Number 57 is Ariel Amador, another 80 grade name, at least 70 grade name on this top 100 list. Colorado Rockies shortstop prospect, probably a candidate to move to second. Switch hitter with elite field to hit. I think he could potentially be a plus hitter. 90% zone contact last year from both sides of the plate. way ahead of his year's approach. One of the lowest chase rates you're going to find, especially at the lower levels. And already sneaky pop. 101.5 mile per hour, 90th percentile exit velocity, for example, would be right on par with Anthony Volpe. You don't have to hit the ball extremely hard, especially being in the Colorado ranks. That said, I think he's going to grow into a little bit more power. He's got to lift the ball more, though. 55% ground ball rate too high. That's something that I'm sure will get better. But the contact rates are elite. The approach is elite. He's a switch hitter, good defender at second, might be able to get by at short. And he did that as a 19-year-old last year.
Yes. 80 grade baseball name, 80 grade headshot with Fresno last year. So good.
Yeah,
dude.
I mean, super fresh.
Good. So fresh. Chain popped, braces on. He's just got the side smile going. Yeah, I mean, Amador is the young guy that you should be really excited about. And he is probably on the same timeline that Drew Romo is. Romo going to spend this entire year in double. I assume Amador could probably end this year in double, right?
Yeah.
As like a really young guy. So the first wave is probably going to look like, Tolia and Tovar are the first wave, but then, Veen and Bernabel is going to be the next wave. And then Amador, Romo, and I think Gabriel Hughes can catch up to those guys as the final wave. And then the Rockies get exciting. But Amador, I think you've got him a couple spots ahead of Drew Romo, like 15 spots ahead of Drew Romo. I think that those two are kind of in lockstep. Like they can do some cool stuff.
100%. And I'm really excited about Amador. One of the higher floor, lower level guys you're going to find with that bat. And I could see him feasting on the big gaps over Coors Field by the time he gets there. Should climb relatively quickly. Last but not least in this episode is number 56, Edgar Quero, catching prospect, Los Angeles Angels. Quero got a really aggressive assignment to Double-A. I think I spoke about it maybe in our live stream. I was able to kind of speak to someone within the Angels org, and they said that they were a little bit aggressive with Quero because of the fact that they love the coaching staff there in Rocket City. And that shows you what kind of priority Edgar Quero is, right? Like they're going to promote him quickly because of how polished the hit tool is. He's a plus hitter, switch hitter, really, really good from both sides of the plate. Sneaky pop that's continuing to get better. I think he's going to have above average power, but does a good job of driving the ball in the air. Glove is a work in progress, but high end makeup earns high points for what he does in terms of pitch calling. But he's got to get a little bit better defensively. Very raw in that regard. That's fine. But the bat is really what the calling card is, and what could keep him as a relevant prospect, even if the catching doesn't come along. And I love the fact that the Angels are putting him in a position where it's challenging in Double-A, and they feel like he's got the right coaches around him to develop defensively and offensively. Pretty good pitching staff over there in Rocket City too. Quero is a name to watch and a very special talent.
Yeah, I mean, he was one of those guys that like you pull up the minor league leaderboards from a year ago. It was Christian Encarnacion Strand and Edgar Quero that were like the two names that I was like, who is this?
Yeah.
But Edgar Quero was that guy, 111 games. You mentioned he was incredible last year, hit 312, but how about the 435 OBP? And so far this year, I mean, just 7 games, but he's hitting 308. He's got 8 hits and 34 plate appearances. He's walked 7 times. He's been hit by a pitch. He's sporting a 471 OBP in his first 7 games.
That's as a newly turned 20-year-old 11 days ago in Double-A as a catcher.
Yeah. Did he also catch the no-hitter where they lost 7-5? Because I would say bad job catching if that's the case.
Let's see. That would have been against, I think the answer is almost Chattanooga. Well, he caught 2 games against Chattanooga, the 6th and the 8th.
I have no idea which one it was.
But it was the one that they lost 7-5.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, he caught that game.
He caught a no-hitter. Good for him.
Yeah, I mean the catching's a work in progress. But think about this, like who he caught in that game. Coleman Crow, one of the higher like IVB fastball guys, and then he had to catch Ben Joyce just spiking 104.
Yeah.
So yeah, like he's getting thrown into the ringer here. And while I'm sure the defense is a work in progress, he's still hitting while doing that, and I'm sure learning a ton. If you can handle a wild 104 from Ben Joyce, I think everything else will be gravy. So I do love what he is doing. This is a name that if you ask me, like, who's someone that you could see rising into the top 20 in the midseason update, here's Exhibit A. because I think he could be a guy that easily does that. One of the lowest chase rates you're going to see as well. There's a question of how much power he's going to hit for. He's like 5'8", but he already gets into a decent amount. 102.5 mile per hour, 90th percentile exit velocity last year is pretty darn good. And I think he flashed a little bit more than you'd expect in the max exit velocity department, put up some 108s, 109s. And there should be a little bit more power in the tank there. Even if the glove doesn't come along, I love that bat, but I think the glove can come along to be even just average. Real quick before we wrap up, Jack, we got 2 promotions that we talked about on the Just Baseball show, but we obviously got to hit on it here. His teammate, Zach Neto, gets the call up. That is awesome. We didn't get to talk about it. We'll talk about it more in tomorrow's episode on the Open, but I just wanted to mention it real quick. So I'm sure some were probably waiting for our reaction to that. Neto picked up his first hit today as we're recording this. He's going to get it. We talked about him as a guy that we thought would start a wild card game for the Angels. And we said he'll be up by the end of the year and should make an impact for the Angels. Well, here he is now. Very excited to see what he's going to do, playing everyday shortstop for a team that's got their eyes set on the playoffs. Zach Neto is a special talent and is a candidate to be able to do this. And I'm really glad that the Angels are giving him a shot too.
Yes. Neto is, I looked at it from the Ohtani lens, where this is a great pitch from the Angels to keep Ohtani because they're willing to be aggressive and try and win with him. But from a Neto perspective, if anybody taken in the first round last year is going to survive like this right away, it's Zach Neto. This was a guy that saw immense success at the mid-major level in the Big South at Campbell. Those types of guys, they are the dude. And while they may not be seeing SEC pitching all the time, what they are doing is building the confidence to know that they can be anywhere. Because this guy was a first-round pick out of a mid-major school. Those guys hardly ever deal with imposter syndrome, as backwards as that sounds, because they were the guy, and they are in a healthy and good way as confident as they come.
So the thing that stands out to me with Neto and why I think it's going to translate really well and why it has translated, you mentioned the mid-major where he hits over 400, then goes to the Cape, hits there, high A, hits there, double A, hits there. And what the reason why I think he's so polished and so advanced is that he was a very hit tool oriented guy coming out of high school that had to really do everything fundamentally sound to get the most out of his game. And that's why he committed to Campbell and not UNC. What ended up happening, he hits a little bit of a growth spurt, adds some strength. And now this very fundamentally sound player has a little bit of power, has a little bit more speed, has a little bit more impact. And he didn't lose all of those really impressive fundamentals that helped him be a really polished hitter and helped him be a really well-rounded player. That's going to translate at the big league level too. Even if he's, struggling to, put up similar numbers that he put up in other spots, he's going to be productive and battle and be a good, a better option than they had previously based on that grinder mentality and that high floor that he has. Brett Baty gets the call up and gets brought back up. This guy's not going to look back. I'm going to put I'm going to put my flag down on that. I've seen everything that he needs to possibly do in AAA. His glove has gotten better. Sitting 112 homers oppo. There's really not much else we need to see from Baty. I think he's ready to take over the hot corner for the Mets and maybe never look back.
Yeah, no, I mean, Baty is the third baseman of the future. And I think, we parlayed the Baty conversation into the Francisco Alvarez conversation on the Just Baseball show. And it's, hey, Baty is ready. Baty has proved it. Alvarez has not. And we're seeing Alvarez up there play sporadically. Couldn't be a more different situation with Brett Baty. He's going up there to play every day against right-handed pitching. And I think if you see a Baty, Eduardo Escobar platoon at third base with Baty getting, 2/3 of the share with right-handed pitching. And then as soon as this Eduardo Escobar deal is up, which I think this is the last year we're seeing Eduardo Escobar, maybe one more year after that.
One more after this one, but they'll probably trade him.
Yeah, you can trade him for scraps, a la James McCann this past offseason. But I think this year is a platoon, and the next year he takes over in an everyday role. We're seeing the start of a great career for Brett Baty.
Very excited about that. Very excited to get through the top 55 prospects in future episodes. We'll continue to fly through this list. Jack, you got something?
I figured out the math. 55 to 41, 40 to 25, 24 to 11, and then the top 10.
I love it. I love it. That is perfect. And that's the way we're going to do it to finish up this top 100. Also, check out So Rare MLB. It is free fantasy where you can win prizes like VIP rewards, merchandise, Ethereum, and other things that are really fun. I've been having a blast playing the game. If you listen to the Just Baseball show, we've talked about it a ton. You can make your lineup for free with the link in the podcast description for a chance to build your lineup, win big rewards, and just have a lot of fun. People have been DMing me their lineups. Basically, you put your team together with a budget, you get as many points as you can, and you finish in these competitions depending on where you finish. Depends on what kind of reward you get. Definitely go check out So Rare MLB. That'll do it for this episode of the Call Up. Looking forward to talking top 55 prospects with you tomorrow.